Hey, what's going on, y'all? We are going to show you how to cook a brisket from start to finish. First thing you want to do is pat your brisket dry. Now, the brisket has already been soaking in a wet marinade that I made. Some people call it a brine. It's been in there for about 16 hours. Usually like to go 24 hours, but I want to go ahead and get this brisket on today. So the first thing you want to do is pat the brisket dry. I'm going to pat the other side dry once I actually flip this. We need to trim some of this fat off of the brisket. When you're picking a brisket at the store, one of the things you want to look for is how much wiggle room does it have. You pick a brisket up and it's tough like this, doesn't have any wiggle room, that means that 9 times out of 10 when it cooks, no matter what you do to it, that's exactly what you're going to have. Now your back side of the brisket, you have some of this silver skin and you have this big hunk of fat right here that will not render when you cook. So we're just gonna take that whole piece off. Now I'm using a boning knife. Those seem to be the ones that trim the best when you go to trim fat off of a brisket or anything like that. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna trim that hunk of fat off of there. Now I'm not the best at trimming fat, but I do good enough. I'm gonna come back to that in a second, but let me just go ahead and get this little piece off of the back of here. Really, you're not looking for any fat on your, what's called the opposite of the fat side. The fat side, you'll see exactly why it's called the fat side here in a second. But you just want to trim some of this off of here. Get some of that trim down, just to lean it up a little bit. Some of this fat and stuff like that, like I say, it won't render when you cook it, so we just got to go ahead and take that off. Now I'm gonna get back into this hunk of fat. So what I'm actually gonna do is turn this around so I can get a better angle on it. And this is I believe this was about a 12.5-pound brisket. Now when you trim this fat, you always want to make sure you trim evenly. You don't want to you want to try your best to avoid creating a pocket. So even though on the other side, you'll see what I mean, there's a piece of the brisket where there will be a fat piece like that you would just want to cut into and carve out all of the fat. You just want to come evenly and get as much of that off as you can. And if you lose a little bit of that brisket, hey, just take that L. Really, that's the only thing I can tell you. Now on this side piece here, a lot of y'all know a lot about side pieces. On this side piece, what you want to do is you have a layer of fat right here. So we're actually going to cut a little small piece of the brisket because we want that to be all brisket on this side. So we're just going to trim that all the way off. See, so we're going to slice just a little piece of the actual brisket just to make sure we get that fat. And this is going to make for a better cook when you, it's going to make for a better slice once you're done. See, so what we have here on this side is we have this layer of fat right here. So we trimmed that down a little bit so we can get that part, and that's what's going to render. Now on this end, we're going to trim this hunk right here. Now these knives that I'm using, they're extremely sharp, so you want to make sure you're paying attention when you're cutting, because I'm not saying I've cut myself before. I'm just saying if I did, it would probably hurt a whole lot, and it would be a pretty deep cut. Alright, now we're getting ready to flip this brisket over. Alright, now let's see what we have. on the other side. And just so you know, this layer right here, this is where your point and your flat meets. This is called the flat. Let me flip it over and it'll be a little bit easier to understand. This is called the flat, the flatter side. This thick end over here, this is called the point. This is going to be the fattier piece of meat. When you go in and you when you cut it, this would be the piece that if you were to make burnt ends, that's what you would make it out of. So we're going to flip this brisket over and we're going to start trimming some of the fat off of. This is what I told you, the other side was not the fat side, this is the fat side. Obviously you see this whole layer of fat right here. And just so you would know, on the side of the brisket that's even, that's how you know which, if it's a left brisket or a right brisket. That side that's even, that's the part, the brisket sits on the cow like this. So this is a left side of a brisket right here. So we're going to trim some of this fat. Now on this side we're pretty much okay. But you want to trim some of this fat down on this side especially. And you'll see exactly what I mean once I start coming in here and start carving. So you want to take this down to the general rule of thumb is about 1/4 inch. Some of this, sorry about that, y'all. Some of this fat will never render. So what you'll have to do is trim. That's why you're trimming a lot of this fat off of here. A lot of this fat is tough, and like I say, it'll never render. So the only thing it's gonna do is make for a tough chew when you go to eat this brisket. To me, you can't really go too lean if you smoke the brisket really well. The only problem where you can worry about going too lean is if you're cooking it fast, you're gonna need a lot of that fat that you can get away with if you actually are cooking it low and slow. I don't like high and fast on a brisket. To me, you wasting a cook. Part of the brisket is the smoke flavor. And it's hard to obtain that real good smoke flavor when you go in and you trim. You don't trim enough fat, and when you go in and you cook it high and fast. So this looks pretty good. This right here is the section, one of the sections that I was talking about, where you would be tempted to just carve into this, but you just want to come across that evenly. And if you lose some of your brisket to go with an even cut, so be it. But once you start cutting this, you'll see how that fat layer is a little bit different from the rest of the fat, and it lets you know that it won't really render down. So we're going to peel that back. We're going to take a little bit more off of this. Like I said, it's easy to want to create just a pocket and cut all of that out. That's not what we're going to do. All right, I think that's pretty good on the fat side. That's pretty good. Looks pretty good to me. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna change gloves out and we're gonna start marinating this brisket. I'm gonna show you one thing that I do when I go to marinate. So I'm gonna have one glove that I'm gonna use for the marinade, and this other glove is gonna stay on the brisket. So this is gonna be my free hand for seasoning. Rubs that I use, it's going to be this one here. It's called the Holy Cow, and this one, which is called the Gospel. Those are my two go-tos for marinating a brisket. Now, these are by a company called the Meat Church. I am not a fan of pre-made rubs, but with these, I will actually use those. Now, I just switched and used this hand, so I'm going to wash this hand again. But one thing you want to do before you actually start seasoning your brisket is you want to see which way the what the grain is on the brisket, which on this brisket, the grain goes this way. So what you want to do is you want to make one little small cut the way that you're going to cut the brisket, which is against the grain. Because once you start to smoke that brisket, if you get a good bark and a good smoke ring, it might be a little difficult to see which way the grain is going. So we're going to make ourselves just a little groove right here, so when we come in to slice this thing, we'll see exactly how that's supposed to be done. But I'm going to go ahead and just okay, so this hand is going to be to control the brisket. This hand is going to be to control the seasoning. So we're going to put our Holy Cow on first because this is our thicker seasoning. This is the one that has coarse black pepper on there. So of course I want to make sure I hadn't touched anything, but after I start touching, then it's going to matter which hand is on the glove, which hand isn't. We're just going to come in and season this. A generous coat. Some people will put something like mustard or coffee, which I never understood, to create a binder. I'm gonna show you one way you can do that without needing to do something like that. So we're gonna come in with our Holy Cow. Now, you don't want to rub in your rub. You can pat it, but you don't want to rub it. The reason why is because once you start rubbing that seasoning in, you're gonna end up, if you were generous on your rub, one thing that you're gonna do is you're gonna prevent a lot of the airflow from going into the meat. So that's our Holy Cow. And again, this is by the Meat Church out in Waxahachie. Meat Church, I am in Dallas, so if you do want to send me anything for making this video and giving you guys a shout out, you're more than welcome to comment, send me a message, whatever it is you want to do. And like I said, I'm not sponsored by the Meat Church or Camp Chef or anybody like that. Camp Chef is just a great pit. I know the Meat Church usually uses a Traeger when they do demonstrations and things like that, and I know they sell the Traegers in store. But in my opinion, I'm not a fan, like I said, of pre-made rubs. But I will tell you, all I use on my rubs now are the Meat Church's pre-made seasons. Holy Cow, Gospel, Holy Gospel, Honey Hog. I'm telling you, that's all I use is the Meat Church now. But now that we have that done, we're gonna flip this brisket over. And we're gonna find our line that we created, because we're likely gonna slice on the fat side. So we are going to just take ourselves and make ourselves just a little thin scoring line, so to speak. So when we go to slice this, we know exactly which way is with the grain, against the grain, I'm sorry. All right, we got ourselves a little pocket. So again, first one we're gonna go with is the Holy Gospel, which I am about out of, and I don't know if I have another jar. You can be a little bit more, Holy Cow, I'm sorry. You can be a little bit more liberal on the Gospel. And the reason I use the Gospel with the Holy Cow is because the Gospel is a milder seasoning. There's some coarse black pepper in the Holy Cow, so that gives you a little bit spicier flavor. So don't want it too spicy, of course. So you can go a little bit more liberal on the Gospel versus the. And it looks like I'm gonna need some more. I had enough to finish this off, but actually what I'm gonna do is the Holy Gospel is almost a mix of the Holy Cow and the regular Gospel. So I'm just gonna apply a little bit of this since I'm out. Of course, I'm not gonna go too liberal, but on this side, I'm gonna make sure I catch this side really well. Now, instead of a binder, what I would do is we're gonna let this brisket rest at a room temperature. I'm gonna take a piece of butcher paper and cover it. We're gonna let this rest for about 30 minutes to an hour, and we are going to we're gonna let this rest for about 30 minutes to an hour, and then we're gonna go ahead and put that on the pit at that point. Letting this rest, you will start to see that this will start to kind of create its own binder as the meat starts to sweat a little bit, and it gets a chance for the seasonings to penetrate. Now, as I mentioned, I use a wet marinade before I go in and I put the dry rub on there. So my wet marinade consists of 8 quarts of water, 8 ounces of seasoned salt, 4 ounces of granulated garlic, 2 ounces of MSG. And I let that soak for usually 24 hours. Like I said, it's only been about 16 hours on this. So I'm gonna let this sit for about an hour, and we'll have the pit ready to go when we're ready to put this on. I'm gonna go ahead and grab myself a sheet of butcher paper, just to cover this up so we don't just have this resting on the counter. Especially, you know, it's Texas and it's hot, so you may have some flies in here or something like that, and you definitely don't want those little critters crawling all on our barbecue. So we're just going to touch this down, get that a chance to sweat out, and we'll see you guys in about an hour. All right, y'all, it's been about an hour. So as you can see, the brisket has started to kind of sweat a little bit. So that's going to create more of that crust on this outside layer of this brisket. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing put on. We're going to show you what we have in there. We're going to put a water pan, and we'll be right back. Got our controller set on. You see I spilled a couple of pellets on there. We got our control set to 225 on an 8 smoke. This is our, I just replaced my regular controller with this new Camp Chef PID Wi-Fi controller. and take a look here at the brisket. Always have your water pan in the corner that's going to help keep some moisture in the pit. And we have our thermostat placed into probably the biggest part of the point. That's the temperature that we're going to try to look at when we're maintaining it. We're going to let this go for, I don't know how long. I cook based off of temperature, not based off of time. So when this gets to 185, it's going to be a stall right around 160 to 170. We're going to push through that stall. When it gets to 185, let me go ahead and close this up. When it gets to 185 on the internal temperature, we're going to wrap it up in butcher paper and let it go the rest of the way to 205. So we'll stop, open this up occasionally, probably every hour or two, spritz it with some pineapple juice just to keep it moist. And we'll see you guys in about, let's say probably about 8 hours. All right, y'all, we're about 5 hours into the cook. We've already sprayed it twice. So this is gonna be our third time spritzing it with a little bit of water. Like I said, you just wanna keep it moist. You can spritz this with whatever you want to. I just use pineapple juice. You can use apple juice, water, apple cider vinegar. I just wanna give it some kind of decent sweet flavor when I'm spritzing it though. So we'll see this in a few hours. We're at 149 now on the internal temperature on the brisket. As you can see, 149 on the temperature. So we'll keep this thing going. All right, y'all, we got our brisket up to 185. Now we're gonna go ahead and wrap it. So I'm gonna show you how I wrap a brisket in butcher paper. Wrapping it in foil is fine. The only reason why I don't like wrapping it in foil is because I like that bark to be kind of have a crust to it. And when you wrap it in foil, it's going to get a little bit of soggy and you're going to lose some of that. So we're going to be wrapping it in butcher paper. So I have an actual butcher paper roll over here. So we're going to get us a piece of butcher paper. And I'm going to show you how to wrap the brisket. So I got a couple of paper towels here. And what we're going to be doing is taking our brisket, putting it across here this way. Now this is a this is 24-inch butcher paper. I need to slide this brisket down just a little bit. So this is 24-inch butcher paper. If you're wondering how wide the butcher paper is, 18 will work. You're just probably going to need 2 strips, so you might as well go with a 24-inch butcher paper. So what you want to do when you wrap a brisket is you want to come over the top. These sides we're going to fold in. We're just going to press that line down like that. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Get that in. I'm going to press that all the way down. Now, what we're going to do with the brisket is we're going to flip it. Now we want to make sure we keep up with what's our fat side and what's our fat side and what's our non-fat side. So once you get that wrapped like that, you want to pull it tight. Pull that brisket real tight. Then just want to wrap it again. And that's it. So this is our fat side. Since this is our fat side, we have the brisket, so when we put it back on the pit, this paper will stay down. So we're going to go ahead and put this back on the pit. It's going to go till it reaches 205. We'll take it off. We'll let it rest for about an hour, and then it'll be ready to slice. All right, guys, we've taken the brisket off of the pit. We've let it sit for about an hour. Now it's time for the payoff. This is what we've been waiting for right here. So we're going to go ahead and get this brisket unwrapped. You can still see plenty of juice coming off this brisket. Just sitting in a bed of juice. So it's time for the payoff, y'all, the slicing. So here we go. We're going to slice this brisket. Now remember, when we started, we made this little line right here so we would know which way to slice our brisket. That's when this comes in handy right here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to slice, And as you can see, it's not really a lot that I have to do to slice this brisket. That's good, tender, 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 tender. I'm a fan of the slice. This is the important part to me. How does your brisket slice? That's called the fold test right there. You should be able to take a piece of brisket, put it on your finger, and it folds right over. And the part everybody wants to do is, once you get right here where the point meets the flat, people want to go ahead and cut that. And this is your money shot right here. You should have a bunch of juice just running off of that, which is exactly what we have. Now, I don't like to press the brisket because I don't like to let the brisket juice run out of the brisket, but I can tell you right now, it's plenty of juice in there. So we're gonna go ahead and slice the rest of this thing. And I'm gonna do a thicker slice because one of the things you wanna see is, do you pass that fold test with a thick slice? Looks like we did. We got ourselves a pretty decent smoke ring on here. Like I said, we put the smoke setting on an 8. We cooked it at 225 all the way up until we got to 185 degrees. We took it off and we wrapped it. Once we took it off and wrapped it, we let it go until it hit 205. See that? Just pieces just falling off as I get down here closer to where the point is. So we're gonna go ahead and slice the rest of this baby. That, by the way, is a slab of baby backs that I just took off the pit. Baby backs by far my favorite ribs. And see, now when you get into the part where you start to cut it and it starts to just break apart, that's when you know you basically hit your point. You can see the smoke ring around here on the point and on the flat. Now, where you slice the point is, you turn it sideways and you slice it a different way. The point runs a little bit different than the flat. So we're going to go ahead and take this, and I'm going to actually slice this into some pretty healthy size chunks. Now, I could turn around and make burnt ends with this, which is what a lot of people like to do. And I'm going to show you the point. Same thing, same problem, good problems. Good problems right there. You slice it and it just falls apart. Put it on your hand, on your finger, and it just rolls over your finger. So that's it, y'all. That's how we smoke a brisket, start to finish. Everything in there, how to do it, how to slice it, how to cook it, when to wrap it, what to wrap it with. You got everything you need. That's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me give you one more shot of that brisket. It's hot. I might not be giving you one. Bam. Falls right over. That's how you smoke a brisket, people.